The biggest concern I have is that many newer graduates don't have, and I hate to use the word grip on reality, but I'll say it, a grip on reality of what life is really like after dental school. You don't know what you don't know. It's very scary, and I hear about it firsthand a lot. This is why I think it's very important to find mentors.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raving Patients podcast, sponsored by Cloud Dentistry, the doc sites, and Dental Intelligence. So please pay attention to their commercials because they're a big reason why I'm able to do this so often, and it's one of the things I love to do. So please welcome to the Raving Patients podcast, Amrita Patel. Amrita, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Why don't you let the listeners know a little bit about what you're currently involved with, because you do things differently than your typical dentist. I want to discuss a lot of those things during this 30 to 35 minute podcast.
Definitely. So I am a New York dentist, although I live in Connecticut. I practice with my father. I'm a general dentist and he's an endodontist. I graduated from dental school from NYU in 2011, which puts me just over the mark for being a new dentist. And then I did a GPR, as you have to do if you want to get licensed in New York. And I've been in private practice with my father ever since. He owns a few offices kind of scattered around Westchester County. I know, Len, you're kind of a native, so you know sort of where they are. I'm in my Tarrytown office right now, so when I look out of my windows, I see the Hudson River in Rockland, which is where you're from. Kind of cool. So after I graduated, I was not one of those dental students that was very involved with ASDA, which is the American Student Dental Association. I was more concerned with not failing out of school, which was a very valid fear for a lot of people at the time. And my journey into sort of leadership and organized dentistry, which I know is what we're going to kind of talk about today, along with some new dentist issues, was a funny one. My father was very involved at the local level with the local dental association, and they had an opening for a new dentist position, and he signed me up, and I had no clue. And the next day I got a phone call from headquarters. When would you like your first meeting to be? And I was like, what meeting? I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, your dad didn't tell you? And I was like, oh, really, Dad? And he thought it was the funniest thing ever. And that was 9 years ago. And I haven't looked back. So today, some of the things that I do, I'm on the board of the American Association of Women Dentists, which is something I'm really excited about. I went back to my alma mater, and I'm on the board of the NYU Dental School Alumni Association, and I'm a guest board member over at the Connecticut State Dental Association, because again, I live in Connecticut. And have done some kind of cool things along the way, both in New York with the New York State Dental Association, with the ADA, and that's kind of where I'm at today.
Well, that's awesome. And it's funny, you said you mentioned NYU. When I was, I graduated dental school in 1999, so I'm a little older than you. And I remember when I did not apply to NYU, but the rumor back then was they always said for orientation, they say, look to your left, look to your right. One of those people may not be here when you graduate. So that was a very interesting stereotypical thing about NYU. They took so many dentists. How many people graduated in your class in dental school?
Upwards of 300, because I think they accepted, there was about 200 and change in my class in first year. And then the second year they added in 100 and change international students. So total over 300. Yeah.
So Tufts had like 120. So we were a large class, but NYU was so much bigger than us.
Right.
So that was the stereotypical thing back then. So that's really great. You're involved a little bit in leadership. You're obviously, doing wet figure dentistry, as I like to say. You're doing dentistry just like anybody else is out there. And you're obviously seeing some of the issues that new dentists are dealing with coming out of school. Debt is a major issue. I mean, it's amazing how much school costs. I always talk about the fact that I haven't been given too many things in my life. I've been a hard worker ever since I was 13 years old. I started a baseball card business and making money. But the one thing I was given a education. My parents paid for both undergraduate school at Tulane and my dental school education. So I came out very fortunate. I only didn't realize how fortunate I was until I was a little older, when I didn't have to worry about, I could buy a practice. I didn't have my school loans for that. I can buy a home. I didn't have to worry about school loans. So, dental school debt is a major problem right now. Just out of curiosity, do you have anything or any comments about that? Because I'm sure you, as dealing with new dentists, you come across that more often than anybody else.
It's definitely crushing. One of the things that the ADA has been super vocal about is, kind of the way that interest is charged and how that accrues during school and getting that addressed, definitely down in Washington. So we know that it's an issue. But, and like you said, it directly affects the life that you live after school. And, when you're in school, it's like you're in a bubble, right? And life is rushing by you and you're just in your bubble getting your requirements and doing what you need to do to kind of stay afloat and treading water. And then you get out and everyone that you knew before has been living life for somewhere between 4 to 10 years more than you have, right? And now you're like, okay, so I've got to buy, I have to find an associateship, I have to buy a practice, I need a house, I need all these things. But you've got this giant looming debt. And the one thing that dental school doesn't really teach because they just don't have the time is what I like to call real life dentistry. And in there is how do you service this debt and also maintain a life and also grow your career, which unfortunately is a big problem.
I agree 100% with you just because I see what's going on in the industry and there's posts all over the internet about, hey, I just saw someone yesterday, they took 12 years to pay off $300 and something thousand, which is a really good way to do it. You be a little frugal and you pay it off and you live a different life. And then once you pay it off, you are able to live above your means per se. So obviously you're dealing with a lot of new dentists. So what do you think are the most pressing new dentist issues out there other than specific debt? I'm curious, just real quick, what your thoughts on it. It seems like a lot of new dentists are deciding to join DSOs, the corporate side of dentistry. So I think that's an issue nowadays as well. But what do you think are some of the biggest new dentist issues that we need to be focused on nowadays?
Yeah, I think the number one thing, and I like to say this a lot to people I talk to, is you don't know what you don't know, right? So there's a lot that when you get sort of unleashed onto the world, you just don't know, from things that if you and I had a conversation about it, how do you read a contract and know what you're getting into? And I'm sure you see these posts on the social media forums all the time. I had a handshake deal with someone that I've known forever, and then they end up, in a big mess. Or, I didn't have an attorney read the contract. Is it really worth the $1,500? And then, they're trapped in a situation where they can't get out, even if they sort of want to. So that's kind of one area that I know that a lot of people have issues with. The second one is sort of not having a sense of direction. I like to say this a lot. We as dentists are really good at missing the forest for the trees. We're really myopic. And that doesn't start when you're 45 or 50 or 60. It comes from, right out of dental school, this whole sort of, what do I need to do right now? Well, okay, how do your decisions right now affect where you're going to be in 5, 10, 15, or 20 years, especially if you're not as fortunate as people, frankly, like you and I were. So there's a lot of sort of unknowns and confusion. And what's happened because of the pandemic is that everyone sat behind their screens and was able to crowdsource information, which is a blessing and a curse, right? Depending on where you're getting it from. And not everyone is able to read things through the same lens that more experienced people are. So, you're seeing a lot of people that ended up in bad associateships. And now it's like, well, is everyone out to get me? How do I ever navigate my way out of this? So we're getting a lot of that definitely too with new dentists.
Well, I think a lot of it has, and you mentioned it, is that they don't really teach any of this in dental school. They don't teach you the business side of dentistry at all, which I think should be a part of the curriculum. I think it's really important to be able to teach dental students what they're going to know in the real world, because it's very different than dental school. I mean, there's no similarities related to what you learn in dental school versus what you learn in the real life and how to run a business. When it comes to some of the things you were referring to, getting stuck into contracts and not being able to get out of them and stuff. I don't quite understand that mentality. Is like, you're signing a legal document, get a lawyer to look at it. Right. If you're worried about $1,500, then you shouldn't be going into your own business. And that's just my opinion on things. Yep. But I think you're not, as you mentioned, you're looking at the forest and through the trees. They're not looking at the big picture. Then they're so focused on what something's costing them, not all the money it's going to save them down the road. Exactly. So I'm very opinionated there. And then also, look, you mentioned them going into Facebook groups, and I think Facebook groups are really good because there's a group that you feel comfortable posting in. But I think you have to take the responses as a grain of salt, because a lot of the people honestly don't know what they're talking about. And they're just chiming in. They're not an expert in the space. They think they are, and they can give you some really bad advice. Even when it comes to online reviews, which I talk about, when people are saying, no, you should do this, I'm like, you can't do that. That's not, don't believe that. Right. So I get very frustrated because that's my expertise, and people think they know more than I do, and they don't. Right. So I think I think a little bit of a tidbit is, I think you feel comfortable in these Facebook groups, but go to the expert, hire an attorney, hire somebody who negotiates leases, hire somebody in that space to be able to be on your team to walk you through the process of doing all these things as a new dentist.
Correct. And kind of linked to that is find a mentor. And a mentor doesn't necessarily need to be another dentist. A mentor could be someone who lives their life in a way that you want to emulate, or has goals and dreams that line up with yours, or some sort of ethos that resonates with you. Find someone that you can bounce ideas off of. And sometimes it's better if it's not a dentist. It's better if it's someone that can look at it at that 30,000 foot view and say, you know what, maybe, I would do things this way, or maybe you should contact this person, and have someone there that you can sort of talk through things with. Aside from my father, thank God I have someone like that, have a net of people that I go to that are able to advise me because they've seen it all, especially when it comes to things in the sort of greater organized dentistry world. But I think that that's really important. And again, when we lost the ability to have human and physical contact as a sort of side result of the pandemic, I think a lot of that was forgotten, but a mentor will definitely be able to help you guide you through some of those things.
I agree. I think you need to always have a mentor, and it doesn't always have to be a dentist. Find someone that you connect with that can advise you on certain things, but also if it is a dentist, you get extra bonus there.
Yep.
I want to switch topics now, unless there's any other new dentist issues that you felt were problematic.
No, I think we hit the big ones.
Okay. So I then want to get into something that I know you want to talk about, which is leadership development. Because I think that, as I mentioned to you before we were recording, I was asked to get into the leadership, very early in my dental career over 15 years ago. But I felt that there wasn't it was all the old fogies, and I hate to use that term, but it was the old guard. It was like a boys club. And I know things have changed. I know that, you're a big proponent of that. So can you talk a little bit about, where you stand on leadership development in the industry? Definitely.
I think the landscape of dentistry is changing, thankfully, to reflect what dentistry really looks like today. And what I mean by that is that the demographics of the dental school class have shifted. Even when I graduated, it was, I think, a majority women. And, you're seeing not just women, but also people from all sorts of different backgrounds. And what we needed was leadership to reflect that. We needed leadership to be relevant and relatable to what dentistry really looks like today. And look, I don't ever want to discount what the wisdom of the people that have come before us and have been doing it for a long time provides, right? I like to tell people that we walk on the path that was paved by the people that came before us, but you have to be able to take that journey. And in order to do that, you need to be able to have a voice that matters. And that comes from allowing newer and frankly, sometimes younger people into positions of leadership. So I can speak to my experience. For me, I am very intentional with the things that I take on because I want to show newer dentists and newer members of our profession, even if there's something that you're interested in that maybe you feel like might not be a good fit. If you see someone that looks like you, maybe someone that's younger, maybe someone that's from a diverse background, maybe a woman, maybe a man, whatever it is, that you might feel like you can do it too. And that's great because you and I can't do what we do forever. There's got to be people behind us that sort of carry the torch. And ultimately, that's the goal of leadership, right? Empowering others towards whatever it is that your objective is.
How do you recommend if somebody is interested in leadership roles to some extent? How do you recommend they go about reaching out, learning more about what opportunities are for them? Because I know it's still it's changed over the years, but it's still a very unknown aspect of dentistry is joining some leadership roles.
Yeah. So I think the best place to start is whatever your local dental association is. You don't need to go to the state or you don't need to go right to the national. We're all part of what we call the tripartite. So you've got a local dental association. So for us, it's Fairfield, Stamford, the 9th District if you're in New York. Then you've got your state, so Connecticut, New York, Florida for you, and then national, the ADA. So, your local dental association is the best place to start. A lot of those people are people that you refer to or that refer to you. They're familiar faces, so it's not as sort of daunting. And that's how you find out what kind of roles might be open and where you might be able to contribute.
And that's really good information. Thank you for that. I'm curious your thoughts on, especially during the pandemic, I think people were very frustrated with what the ADA did. I know there's so much things going on at the ADA and people are wondering what they're paying their money for if they're an ADA member. I know people who've decided not to be a member of the ADA anymore. You probably, I think you were in Chicago a couple of times for some ADA, stuff as well. So can you just touch base on your role that you think the ADA is playing here? Obviously it's a tough position to be in just because I think everybody wants to do it their way and there's one organization running the entire industry. So can you give some thoughts on that, please?
Yeah. So, obviously, like I said, the time of the pandemic was very polarizing. We were in sort of a very unknown situation. I will tell you then, when it comes to value for your dues, one of the places that you get the best value for that isn't necessarily a tangible benefit is our PAC, right? So our ad PAC is one of the strongest healthcare lobbies and loudest voices in Washington. And the ADA Washington staff and our lobbyists do an amazing job at protecting our profession. And we are working on being able to communicate what it is that they do more effectively so people are able to actually read it and see it rather than seeing a press release 10 months after the fact, after things were kind of put together. One of the reasons dentistry was included in PPP is because of our PAC and because of ADA Washington. So, this is an amazing benefit, but not necessarily something that was communicated as transparently as maybe it could have been. So we're working to make sure that when things like this happen, and not the pandemic, but other big important issues, we're able to share that with dentistry in general so they understand where the value comes from. But I definitely hear everyone's frustrations. Are we closed? Are we open? Why is it a state decision? Why is this state open? Why is that state not open? New York was one of the last states to reopen, along with, I believe it was Arizona, because the Navajo Nation, I think it was Arizona or New Mexico, had a very, very high rate of COVID. And so our two states were the last two states to open. And it was really, really frustrating for a lot of people. But, we're hoping, like I said, with better communications and a better message, we can sort of get that word out earlier next time.
Yeah, and I think that's great that they did that. I was a little unsure about what was actually they were doing because you not even about the pandemic, but you always hear these negative stories about dentistry. Always. Everything in the news about dentistry is negative in most cases. But you never see you never see or hear necessarily like the ADA's response to any of these news stories regarding dentistry. And I think that's a very frustrating thing, being a dentist and wondering what our higher body is doing about it, or potentially responding to kind of divert attention away from it, or having a response to do whatever the situation is. I remember, when the guys were, the dentist got accused of like reusing needles, and everybody was afraid of HIV and transmission of hepatitis and all these other things. I got interviewed on the news, and they asked me why the ADA hasn't said anything about it. I'm like, I have no idea. So right. I think that's and every story, not man kills wife, dentist kills wife. It's like
dentist kills lion. I mean, yes.
Yeah. So yeah. I just think that's a very interesting thing, and I'm always curious to take the AD has when they see these stories that come out.
Yeah. I think one of the things that actually my sort of net of mentors and I have been working on is a better way to work with the ADA to get this sort of information out. And I know that they're developing, like a social media unit, frankly, to be able to respond to these things more effectively. Because look, every big corporation, every nonprofit has some sort of division that deals with this, whether it's media, print media, social media. So that's, again, us shifting to be more relevant and relatable. And that's definitely coming through the line so that we can more effectively deliver a response when this stuff happens.
That's great. So another thing I wanted to talk about was organized dentistry. And you mentioned there's tripartite. You've got the very local level, you've got the state level, and then you got the ADA. And there's tons of study clubs out there, trying to get people to join. And again, a lot of the study clubs I used to be part of are just very, very old people involved. And the new dentists don't come into these organizations. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious your thoughts on this, because I gave a seminar at in Tampa area, Pinellas County Dental Society, and it was a very much an old guard, mm-hmm. and they're having problems attracting the new dentists. And I remember I was on the board of one of the local dental societies in Philadelphia, and we were struggling with attendance because it was a lot of older people, and the younger people who needed to be there were not. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious your thoughts on, why don't you think younger dentists like to go to these things, and what you think these organizations can do to get the younger dentists to come, I guess is the best way to state it.
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. Look, at the end of the day, a lot of the benefits that are provided by study clubs and even sometimes membership, people also get through larger group practices, right? And larger group practices could be privately owned, they could be DSOs, whatever it is. So you've got a whole subset of people that are getting those kinds of benefits, CE and things, from other places, right? Especially as the number of newer dentists that join larger group practices and DSOs rises. And then you're getting exactly what you said. You're getting people that say, you know what, these are full of people that I don't relate to, so why would I go? So what we're working on doing is quite frankly, rotating speakers and topics out. So it is not the same faces. It is new topics. It's relevant topics. Hitting some of the new dentist concerns that we talked about is a big one. When I met you in Florida, I sat in on the Florida Dental Association membership and new dentist committee meetings. They were nice enough to invite me. And I was listening to the concerns of Florida dentists and thinking, this is the same thing I've heard in New York. This is the same thing I've heard in Connecticut. So everyone is saying the same thing. And we're working on being able to provide a solution that matches that. And that's not something that would have worked 10 or 15 years ago. So I know that there's been a lot of, kind of online based and remote based study clubs that have sprung up specifically targeted towards new dentists. I was on one recently called the New Dentists Business Club. It's run by a doc out of California who got ADA 10 under 10 with me in 2021. And she brings in different faces, new people that work in a variety of practice settings, and it's all remote. And she gets a great attendance. But being able to translate that into in-person is what we're working on. And I think that's one way to sort of grab and hold people's attention. The other thing I think too is the value of the camaraderie and finding your family again after you lose it when everyone scatters after dental school graduation. Both of my best friends from dental school live in California, and that was really hard. I can only see them so many times a year, but I was able to sort of find my people again through organized dentistry, which I think is a really important benefit too, because this is hard. It's not easy to do what we do.
Oh, I agree with you on that. Look, I'm 49 and I'm just about done with dentistry, and I worked hard. It's amazing. I worked 23 years since I graduated dental school. And I can't imagine doing this at 75 years old. So it's crazy that some dentists do, and they love it, and they don't want to give it from they love. And if you can wave a magic wand and think about what you would hope for with graduating students to do in the industry. Obviously, everybody's not going to follow this path. Some people say I'm only going to be an associate. I'm never going to be an owner. They make that decision. They want to raise a family if they're a female, and they have obviously other objectives at that point. But what do you, if you can wave a magic wand and say to a new dentist coming out where you think they should go from a leadership perspective, from an advocacy perspective, from an organized dentistry perspective, what do you think the ideal result is with these new dentists who are coming out?
I think, and I always tell people that you need to be true at the end of the day to your own voice and your own self. So my path and my journey might not be real or be doable for someone like you said that has other goals and objectives. But, I think as dentists, we have a really unique ability to not just be leaders in organized dentistry, but also in our communities and really get involved. There's a lot of people that are very into community-based activities, church or whatever your faith is based activities. And I think that's really important. I have dentist friends that have created scholarships at their high schools, go back for career day. These things are important. And I remember being a high school student sitting at career day and, hearing stories and learning about what people were doing that otherwise I wouldn't have known about. So, I think leadership comes from whatever it is that you feel is real to you. And again, if it's organized dentistry, that's great. But if it's something in your community or anything else that you're passionate about, dentists are in a sort of like a really good power position to truly enact change, however it is that might be.
That's great. If you, could say what most concerns you about the industry moving forward, especially for new dentists, what would you say those are?
I would say that the biggest concern I have is that many newer graduates don't have, and I hate to use the word grip on reality, but I'll say it, a grip on reality of what life is really like after dental school. And that's a combination of factors. It's because they weren't, maybe, taught in school. It's because they're reading things online and there's not really anyone sort of real or knowledgeable or an expert to bounce ideas off of. It's because you don't know what you don't know. It's very scary. And I hear about it firsthand a lot. And so this is why I think it's very important to find mentors.
And I agree with you on everything you said there. The other question I wanted to ask you was, and it just came out of my head, so I will have to move on from there. I was going to say something and I totally lost what I was going to say. Anything else that you think is important to get out there for the listeners? We have a lot of younger dentists, listening to the podcast. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to say any final words, but anything you think is really important, that you need to, or that you want to use for this forum to get out to those dentists?
Definitely. So a couple things. First of all, always be teachable. Realize that there is a lot that you need to learn and never stop learning. You never can learn too much. And whether it's from books or CEs or experts or mentors or the social media forums, whatever it is, just always be teachable is the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is that burnout is not a status symbol. So we have this tendency to say we're so involved in all these things and we're so tired and oh my God, I'm so burnt out. And I see it a lot on social media. It's not a status symbol. Some people manage it better than others, but unfortunately, if you don't manage it, it can completely take over your life with sometimes very awful consequences. And we, have all seen the news stories and heard the awful stories. Make sure that you find your peace. And that looks different for everyone. Whatever it is, fishing, painting, yoga, Pilates, mine's buying shoes, whatever it is, find your peace. And if it's within dentistry, that's great. Could be volunteering, could be oral health screenings at a fair, but something that involves you getting out of your own head, getting out of your own way, and just mentally settling down. 5 minutes in the morning before you go off to work. I remember being on my rotations in my GPR and, I was on my anesthesia rotation and one particular surgeon, anytime before they had a big case, they would, do like a mindfulness moment where everyone in the OR, they're all scrubbed in. They just stood there and centered themselves for a minute. They're doing huge procedures. So find whatever it is that grounds you and brings you peace because the burnout is real and it can definitely be all encompassing for a lot of people. That is honestly probably the most valuable thing I think I've said in the last 30 minutes. So I hope that hits home for a lot of people.
It does. And obviously there's a lot of stories about dentists who, take their own life. I don't know if I bought a practice from a dentist who committed suicide. So that hits home very strong for me. It was a very tough transition when I bought the practice but I rebranded, gutted the building and changed it up. And that's kind of where I got my start. But I do remember what I was going to say. As I was selling my practice, I had new dentists reaching out to me, or younger dentists reaching out to me who wanted to buy my practice. My practice was $1 million+ practice, 1+ practitioner, 4 team members total. It was a popular purchase, for people. But I had doctors reaching out to me who said, well, I want to clear $300,000 or $400,000 as the owner year one. I'm like, dude, it doesn't work that way. You have to get a grip. Running a practice is very different. You're used to associateship. I mean, you have to pay the bills first and foremost before you get paid. And a number of them just didn't understand that. And I said, you need to get a grip. You need to have a whole dose of different reality because you're in for a rude awakening when you're a business owner.
Yep. Agreed. Totally agreed. And that's what we were kind of just talking about. And you see it all the time when you read some of these posts and, being an owner and being an associate are two very different things. And look, there's people that are great associates for life and that's wonderful. That's great. But you put your owner hat on and you're the captain of the ship. And my father always likes to tell me the captain doesn't leave. Like you got to be there and that's it. It doesn't matter. And like you said, everything else has to get paid. You got to take care of your team because if you don't take care of them, you're only hurting yourself in the end. They will be there for you and save you out of situations you can't even imagine. Our main assistant has been with us since I was 13 years old. She was my father's assistant first. And now she's, we share her, but she's amazing. And I can't even tell you how many times that she's saved me. And not just in dentistry and clinical dentistry, just in life. But these things are very important. And as an associate, sometimes, again, we get very myopic. You don't realize these things. And then, suddenly you want to be an owner and you want all the fun perks that come with it. Well, there's a lot to it. Yeah,
exactly. No, I agree with you 100% there. So this was awesome. Thank you for sharing some of your expertise. What I want to do for the next couple of minutes is I want to read you these Q&A questions. It's something I do on all the podcasts. Sure. Lightning round. I'll ask you to try to think of the fastest answer. If you want to go into a little bit of an explanation, that's fine. We'll go through like 7 to 10 questions here.
Okay. Let's go.
So if you've achieved all of your life goals tomorrow, what would you do next?
Move to India.
And buy shoes.
Yep. I have shoes shipped over.
What is one subscription you don't want to live without?
Amazon Prime.
In your office, and this may not be relevant to you, but I'm sure you have some say in it. How did you build your fabulous team that you were talking about?
I did not have much of a say in it, but I will tell you that the single best place to find team members is not sometimes from people that have dental backgrounds. I will meet, a really nice waitress, a very helpful person at Neiman Marcus, whatever, and say, listen, like you seem like you really like your job. Like I was really happy with our interaction. If you know someone that's like you or have a friend, here's my card. And I've gotten amazing people that way.
That's really good. What deserves all of your attention but seldom gets it?
Honestly, I'm very, very bad sometimes at self-care. Need to be better.
All right. What has been the most satisfying moment in dentistry for you?
Most satisfying moment in dentistry was that my grandparents, when they were alive, came to visit me when I started working. And my grandfather, who was 80 something years old at the time, was like, "You finally made it." And they raised me. So it was kind of a cool moment.
Who has been your greatest inspiration?
My dad.
My dad too. My dad passed away, unfortunately, last June. He was a dentist too in Rockland County. So, what have you learned from the most successful person you know?
Find your peace.
Okay. What are you most excited about in dentistry right now, and what keeps you up at night?
I am most excited about this awesome new crop of dentists that we have coming out, and some great new leaders that I've been able to work with that are all really motivated. What keeps me up at night is protecting our profession so that we can continue to pass it down through the generations, because I really believe we're really kind of unique in that way, and you're seeing third and fourth generation dentists, and I want to be able to continue that.
All right, 2 questions left. What is your favorite book, or what book have you read multiple times that you highly recommend?
Oh gosh. Dental or not?
No, it could be not dental.
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. Okay. All right. And last question. If you had a magic stick, what are 3 things you would change in the world right now?
I would probably get rid of all of this craziness going out around in, where is it? Russia, Ukraine, still happening. That's very awful and still ongoing. That needs to stop. Second thing, fix whatever has been broken in the airline industry so that people can get home and get to where they need to be. It's really, really awful right now. I keep hearing all these awful, awful stories. And the third thing that I would fix, God, I don't want to say like world poverty or world hunger. You know what I would fix? I would fix the massive sort of overlying discontent that a lot of people have with organized dentistry.
I think that was great. Any final thoughts? Do you want to share your contact information? So if anybody has any questions regarding anything we talked about, they can reach out to you.
Definitely. So I'm available kind of all over the place. I'm on LinkedIn, Amrita Patel. My Instagram is at the Dr. Amri, so DRAMRI. Facebook, Amrita Patel. Any sort of final thoughts? I would tell people that, really, like I said, make sure you find someone that resonates with you, that you can talk to. Dentistry can be very difficult. It can also be very isolating, and that connection is invaluable. I'm available. I know that you're super available. I see you responding and helping people out all the time. Oh, and the last thing, don't post HIPAA violations when you respond to negative reviews.
That's great. That's great. Well, Amrita, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to release this episode. I think you did a great job. Greg, you're a really good speaker. So thank you so much for sharing your insight and your authority with the listeners and viewers to this. If you like this episode, guys, please share it. Please let your colleagues know. Most importantly, please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. Review us, which is really important as well. Like I said, I don't ask for reviews too often, but review not only the episode, but the actual podcast. And as I always end these podcasts, remember, your reputation matters. Until the next episode, thanks, Amrita, for joining me, and we'll talk to everyone soon.